Well, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Papa's Workshops. These are for Adam, Brady, Luke, and Brenna, and all those other folks that like seeing an old man make sawdust. So let's get started. All right, here's where we left off last episode. Uh, you know, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I decided I needed to do the joinery for the brackets there, and realized this was not flat. It had a kind of a bulge in the front and tapered toward the top, just ever so slightly. But when you put that up against there, it was noticeable, and I would have to fudge things. So I decided to go back and put it back on the lathe and turn it using my fixture. I used it on the corner columns for the secretary. I'll put a link to that video because I don't have it set up right now to show you what it was. But anyway, it's kind of like a poor man's lathe duplicator. And in this case, I was duplicating a straight line and turn this. So basically, I put a carbide scraper in a holder and run it across there, but it doesn't. The negative to that is it doesn't give a nice finish. So anyway, then I had to remark it. So here we are. We need to do those mortises. And the issue is I thought about doing it by hand, but I don't have a flat reference surface. And normally you would do the joinery while everything is still square. But in this case, we had to turn it because I need to know where the center is. This mortise needs to be headed toward the center of this piece. Because if it isn't straight, if it's off just a degree, we're going to have a crooked bracket one way or the other. It needs to be dead center, and it needs to be straight toward the center of the thing so that it all works out right without having to fudge I'm going to use sliding tenons without having to fudge the sliding tenon. We need it to be square. So I thought about different ways of doing it, but in every case I needed to make some sort of a jig. Even doing it by hand, I'd have to come up with some way of holding this. I couldn't be pounded on the lathe. I have to have some way to cradle this and keep it square. So I came up with a jig for the lathe that would allow me to use a router and do those mortises, and then also I can do these cove cuts for the column. I also did that on the secretary corner columns, but at a smaller scale, and so I was thinking I would do that same thing on this and then make it larger by hand with the carving tools, but give me a nice straight cut to begin with. But the jig I came up with, I'm hoping I can do these pretty much at the proper size, and then just trim up the ends by hand. So let me show you what I got. All right, so I built this box just out of scraps, just a piece of plywood, and I cut a shallow dado. What do you call that in plywood? A dado or a groove? For those that don't know, a dado goes across the grain and a groove goes with the grain, and it goes back to the days of the hand planes. You had a dedicated dado plane which would have spurs in the front that would sever the fibers ahead of the cutter for going across the grain. You don't need that going with the grain, so groove plane would just be the blade and away you'd go. So in plywood, you're doing both. So I don't know what you call that. Anyway, I put a shallow dado in the bottom of this, centered on this, just on the table saw. I didn't put the dado blade in or anything. I just put the board on there, made a cut, flip it 180, and just kept moving the fence out until it I made a piece that fit between the rails here, and when that fit in, so I know this piece is centered on the lathe. Cut these 4 pieces to the same height. That was going to get me just above my piece. I need to be close, close enough for the router to be able to reach down as far as I need to go, right? And then I just nailed it together with the nail gun and scraps to make it as stiff as possible, and it's pretty much there. I got one more cross piece. Actually, these are screwed in, these 2 cross pieces, so you can take the U shape and put it on there when the piece was on there, but I have it off. I'll get to that in a minute. I did one already, and it wasn't right. What happened was I assumed, and you know what happens when you assume, this pencil, this is actually the lathe duplicator tool. You can put the lathe cutter in there, and then this runs on, in this case it's a straight one, runs on whatever. You put a template on these 2 screws and you can do that. But anyway, I also use it as my marker for marking everything on the pedestal piece. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, but that pencil lines up right with the center at both points if I had a table all the way across. So I thought all I had to do is take this, rotate my piece until I got to the 90-degree line that I've got marked on the tapered end for the anthus leaves. So I thought if I did that, then this would be directly at 90 degrees. And then I have my, let me get my, I had this existing router, makes your base bigger. And so I thought all I had to do was then center this over the line that was at the top of the piece. But what happened was I centered it, because it was so hard to see with that piece in there, hard to see, I lined it up with the lobe, we've got the flat and then the 2 pieces. Well, I could see that, so I made sure that I was dead center here and I was dead center there, thought I was good. But then when I actually did it, which is an inch lower, it was off by about 3/16 of an inch, because I wasn't directly over the center. And so even though, the thing was rotated a little bit and I thought I was good, but then when I went straight down, since it wasn't on the center, it didn't work. Now I'm not sure why lining it up like I didn't work, but it didn't. So my next step here, which I haven't done yet, is I took how's that for a router bit? I just took a piece of 1/4-inch rod that I had that's straight, and I'm using that to verify that I'm at the center. So I got to take off that bed. And now when I run this up, I know you can't see it on there, but I can run this up, run that center in, and verify that I'm at the center of that rod. And when I first did this, I was not. I was off just a little bit, like I was on the other. And in the same direction. So I had to readjust my stop. This is just a little scrap piece I have screwed on the back side of this to give me the position this way, and then I've got a stop to get me there. So I think I should be good this time. So I'm going to mount the piece in there and see that I line up at the tips, and see if I can use a mirror or something and verify I'm lined up down below. All right, there's the, I put a plug in it last night, but I don't know if you can see that point right there I was dead on, and there's one that's behind that board, and you know, and this one here I did after I cut this, I went back and verified I was still there, and at the other end, but that's where it is down there, and this line was all done at the same time. It's those all line up. Um, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they don't line up. That must be what the deal is. This is a 10-degree increment, but it lines up at the 90s, and this is a 15, and it lines up at these two should line up at every 90 degrees. So I don't know. The illusion right there is that they don't, but I think when you get it perfectly horizontal, I think it would be. So anyway, let's put the jig on there and see what we got. All right. So for this lining stuff up, I've got just a centering bit in there. So put this in there, lock it down, and then we got to run it down till it almost hits my line, but that's where I ran into a problem before, is I can't see. Now I've got my indexing jig locked, but there's enough slip in this if I rotate this piece so I can get my that's too much. So that is good there. Now it still should be good at the top here. And it's off just a little bit. I think I'm good. So we got to put in an actual bit and give it a shot. All right, we're all set up. I've got 2 stops here, so I can only go this far. So we'll do one, and then we'll take it out there, verify it's right before I screw up the others. Then we'll have a piece of Swiss cheese. So here we go. All right, I think that's going to do it. I had this piece of scrap that's a 1/2 inch wide, so it fits in the mortise is 3/4 inch deep, so that's in there pretty good, and it's pretty much dead center at the end of this. So I think we're good. So we need to put it back on. I didn't, you know, I didn't want to go and do the other ones if it wasn't quite right, like the first one. So now I got to put it all back and do the other 3, and then set up to do these this cove cuts. So we're getting there. I think I found my error. This is the line that was there originally, and it was off a 1/16 at this end. I must have hit, when I was drawing that line across with the fixture, I must have rode up on top of something, or it didn't get straight. So it's like from here to there was not a straight line. If you can kind of look down that, see that lines up better with this now, this second line. So I wasn't that far off, but it was still off. But that's part of my error. So I went to go set up the second one, and it didn't look right. So I gotta check my alignment again. All right, I got all the mortises done, all 4 of them, and I went ahead and did this. I did one, it's on the back side, with the 1/2 inch wide bit, and it didn't, you know, cherry burns really easy, so it's hard to go to those stops and not stop enough where it's not going to burn. So I changed it down to a 3/8 wide cove bit, and I'll mark the lines to make it a 1/2 inch, and then see it's short of the stop. So I'll carve that all by hand, get those nice and straight. There's some bumps in them, and that'll cut out those burn marks all the way around. So I have to do that all by hand later on. So now that we got the mortises in, we can cut the blocks, the brackets that are going to go there, cut them so that we've got this surface and this surface, and probably cut out that so that they fit in there. Then we can put the mortises in both of these, and then mark where it goes onto these legs, and put the mortises in the legs. Then we can, once that's all done, then we can glue up this bottom part and get it ready while we work on the handwork on this guy. All right, here's my setup to cut the second cut. I first cut all the pieces. It worked out to be about a 30-60 degree angle to fit the piece on there. So I cut everything at this angle here, which is 30 degrees from here, or 60 degrees from the top, however you want to look at it. And so now I need to get it 90 between here and here. And my sled does not go up to 60 degrees. So I got a little creative. So I got the block I cut all these from, I cut it at that same angle. I mean, I had already done that. I just trimmed it to be flush. And then I got this little piece here as an insurance that's kind of hooked on there. And then this clamp, it seems to work. I've done this one, and it's square, and I took a big square and went across there, and it's 90. So I think that's going to work. All right, we got them all cut. And they're fit. I cut this out so that it'll fit in there, and I put the pattern on all of them. So we are ready to make the mortises in the bottom and in the side, and we're going to do that on the pantoRouter. And all we need is the center line of where the mortise is going to be, and so we'll take those over and get that done. All right, so here's the pantoRouter. I won't go through into all the details, but just real quick, this makes mortise and tendons. In this case, we're just going to do the mortise. It's very easy to set up. I get to the center of my piece by putting in, I took a cut off, but you could take that piece and you stick it in there and adjust the height of this. And so now that cutter is exactly halfway down. It's basically a pantograph, 2-to-1. So for every 2 inches you move up here, you only move it 1 inch down here, both left, right, up and down. So I run the cutter up against the edge, then I set the depth of cut here to 3/4 of an inch, and I'm ready to go. I've got the template in here that's going to move the amount that I want the mortise to be. And if I was making a tendon, it's a matter of changing the cam based on your bit size to go around the outside of that to make your tendon. It's very easy. All right, I got it done. There's one. Oh, there's the other. And I forgot to mention the other setup thing was that center line that I marked on the piece has to be lined up with this center line. And then the template is centered on that same thing. So very easy to set up. All right, I made some tenon stock, and I put a little cut in it so it's got some way for the air to get out. And this one's in there. I did have to go back and redo the center line. I forgot that on the lathe I pushed this up a little bit and forgot to change it on the template. So I was off by about 1/8 of an inch. So I moved the center line up 3/16, so I've got a 1/16 above and my 1/8 inch down below. So I got a little bit of wiggle room to get that on there. So before we can line these up and cut the bottom, two things. We've got this curve, and we need to hollow out this so that it sits flush. But the whole thing isn't going to sit flush. Only about a little over 1 inch in the middle is. So I'm going to take on the router table and just take a little bit off of these to narrow it down so I know where the edges are, and then we can start hollowing this out so that it fits flush. And once it's all the way in, then we can mark where this other tenon goes. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and cut this pattern out, because I'll lose at least this much of the pattern when I do that. So we'll just go ahead and cut these out, and then run those through the router table, and then some handwork. All right, we got them all cut out, and took a round over bit and did that. So now we need to hollow out this part right there. So I'll do that in here. Just going to use a carving tool. This is a number 3x20. That's close to the radius of what we're after. But I need to kind of mark the outside edge. So we're just taking and we know not to go any farther than that. So we want these two lines right there to hit on the cylinder, and nobody can see if it doesn't make it in the middle, so it can be too deep. But this number 3 gouge is pretty close to what we need to do. So first, the grain is going this way, so I'm going downhill, but I need to get started here. Probably should have honed these a little bit. That's been a while since I've used this gouge. I don't know if I had it sharp or not, but we don't have to go very deep. It's just that should be it. So we'll go test fit it. All right, looks pretty tight in there. No, not seeing any light coming through there. So we are ready to mark our tenons down here. All right, in order to mark the tenons, we've got to have the pedestal be exactly centered and locked in place as far as rotation goes. But since I want to keep the possibility of putting this back on the lathe, if this anthus leaf carving doesn't work out, I don't want to drill out the center for my dowel pin. So what I've done is I turned a dowel pin with a little pencil point on it, and that locks in and gets me centered. And then I drilled a hole and used one of these dowel centers. It fits in the hole. It's got a sharp point on it. I set it down on there, marked for the hole, drilled a shallow hole in the pedestal. So now the whole thing locks into place. If I can get it centered, there we go. There. So now it doesn't move. So now we can put our things in there and mark. I've marked the center line on each one of these. So we just go around, put a tenon in there, and go around and mark our line across here. All right, we got the first one done, and it shows up as I expected. Can't get these. I can't get that in there. So when it comes time to glue it up, we'll have to put all of these in, put a strap around to hold them, and then set the pedestal and these down onto the legs all at once. Because the only way I can get this in there is to lift this up, and then it all fits. So, but when I could do the other three, see, I can't get it out. Do the other three, and then we're ready to glue up the X. Come up with a way to hold the pedestal and start carving the leaves, and dress all that stuff up. Some work to do. Well, that should do it for this episode. I'll go ahead and glue up the feet, or the legs, whatever you want to call them, the X. And then we'll start on carving the pedestal anthus leaves and true out the column section, get those all cleaned out. So until next time, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. That helps get it out to more people. Thank you.